Imagine going to a church for a joyous celebration, only for the roof to come crashing down on you, burying hundreds alive. A church in Akwa Ibom collapsed that killed nearly 300 people, yet no one was held accountable. The pastor in question is still preaching. The government still silent. Welcome to Truth Uncovered Africa. Subscribe now as we expose the stories they don't want you to hear. Thousands gathered at the Reigner's Bible Church, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria, to witness a grand occasion, the ordination of the church founder, Apostle Dr. Akan Weeks, as a bishop. It was a highly anticipated event, drawing worshippers, dignitaries, creme de la creme of Akwa Ibom State, and even the then governor of Akwa Ibom State, His Excellency Udom Emmanuel. The church, however, was still under construction, yet the ceremony went on as planned. Reports later revealed that workers had been rushing to complete the building in time for the big event. When the big day came, barely 30 minutes into the service, just as the choir was about to take the offering, the unthinkable happened. The building began to shake from the foundation, and before anyone could react, the roof caved in. It fell down on the congregation. Heavy metals used to support the structure came crashing down on nearly 5,000 attendees. Chaos and panic erupted. Screams, shouts filled the air as people were crushed. They were trapped and buried under the rubble. The devastation was instant. But not everyone was affected equally. The Governor Emmanuel, was quickly whisked away to safety. The founding father of the church, Apostle Akan Weeks, the man being ordained that day, also managed to escape unharmed. Other high-profile guests survived too. But sadly, it was the nameless, faceless congregation, men and women and children, who suffered the full brunt of the collapse. And as the dust settled down, the world would soon realize that this was not just a tragic accident. It was a preventable disaster, one that would have claimed nearly 300 lives, leave countless injured, and yet, shockingly, result in no arrest, no accountability, and no justice whatsoever. Anyways, immediately this incident took place, one question that lingered in people's mind was how many people died as a result of this tragic incident. The news agency of Nigeria initially reported 60 deaths. A local rescue official claimed that 80 bodies were pulled from the rubble. But shockingly, the teaching hospital in Uyo counted for over 200 fatalities. Some reports claimed as few as 50 deaths. But as bodies were gathered from different mortuaries and hospitals, the unfortunate reality became clear. Nearly 300 people had lost their lives. And that number might have been even higher, considering some victims succumbed to their injuries days later. The story that emerged were heartbreaking. Hear this.
I belong to a choir member of the church. We understand that the whole family was lost in this scene. The wife, the husband, the children, everyone was gone. Inside it, you can find choir robes inside the bed. It's an unfortunate sight.
Another woman had taken her neighbor's 3 children to church that very same day. She returned home alone with nothing but sorrowful words. "I am sorry, madam, your children didn't make it." Some survivors only escaped because they had stepped outside moments before the collapse, perhaps to take a phone call, to get some fresh air, maybe to go ease themselves or to avoid the embarrassment of not having an offering to give that day. Those simple decisions saved their lives that day. But in all this, who was to blame? Governor Udom Emmanuel, who had narrowly escaped death himself, immediately ordered an investigation into the cause of the collapse. A judicial panel was set up, led by Justice Omekoyo Esang, to determine who was responsible. It didn't take long before fingers started pointing at each other. Number one, was it Pastor Akan Weeks' fault? You see, multiple witnesses, including engineers and architects on site, claimed that Apostle Akan Weeks himself was responsible. They went further to claim that he pressured the builders to rush the construction so the church would be ready for his ordination. It was also noted that Pastor Akan Weeks ignored warnings that the structure wasn't ready. He ordered new modifications that compromised the building's stability and integrity, including increasing seating capacity beyond safe limits. He allegedly insisted that scaffolding be removed to create more space, despite warnings from engineers. But guess what? Apostle Akan Weeks denied all these allegations. The apostle argued that construction had been ongoing for 2 years, so it made no sense for them to say that he rushed it. But experts countered that most of the work had been done few months before the ordination, meaning the project was indeed rushed. Secondly, let's look at the government. Is it the government's fault? Another shocking revelation emerged during the investigation that the church building had been marked for demolition 4 times between the year 2013 to 2016. Authorities had declared the site a conservation area unsuitable for heavy structure. Experts even warned that the soil itself was too weak to support a large building such as the church auditorium. The State Urban Planning Agency, UCCDA, had issued multiple orders to demolish the church, but the building was never taken down. Why? The government claimed that they lacked the manpower and equipment to carry out demolition, but whispers suggested something else, that Apostle Akan Weeks had used his influence in high places to prevent the demolition. Now, number 3, was it the engineer's fault? The site engineer testified that he wasn't responsible for the roof, blaming the roofing contractor instead. The roofing contractor, however, claimed that he had warned against removing the scaffolding, but no one listened. Sadly, the accusation led back to Apostle Akan Weeks. If the scaffolding had indeed been removed under his orders, then he was indirectly responsible for the collapse. By the time this investigation concluded, the panel held Akan Weeks accountable for the disaster. Finally, it seemed like justice might be served after all, but your guess is as good as mine. Governor Emmanuel had promised that whosoever was responsible would face the full weight of the law. But when the report was finally submitted, he dismissed the whole findings. Nothing was done. Apostle Akan Weeks was not arrested, the engineers were not held accountable, the church was never rebuilt. But Apostle Akan Weeks simply opened a new church with a different name. Life moved on. For the victims and their family, however, life would never be the same. Now, was there any compensation? You'll be shocked. In the aftermath of this event, Apostle Akan Weeks and the government made a grand promise to pay hospital bills, provide support for survivors, and finance funerals for the dead. But years later, some survivors came forward to expose the lies. One victim claimed that he had to spend nearly 10 million naira of his own money for treatment. Others said they were abandoned, forced to fend for themselves despite promises of government assistance. No compensation was ever given to the families of the deceased. Some survivors even threatened to sue Akan Weeks, but nothing came out of it. After the tragedy, Apostle Akan Weeks made a public apology. He claimed he too had been a victim. Photos surfaced of him with a bandaged leg, walking with a walking stick, suggesting he had sustained injuries too. But many doubted the authenticity of his wounds, believing it was a PR stunt, a move to gain public sympathy. When all was said and done, Apostle Akan Weeks rebranded himself, opened a new church, and continued his ministry. His followers stayed loyal. His influence remained intact, but the hundreds who died that day were forgotten till this day. No one was held accountable, no justice was served, and nothing could be done about it. It often feels like justice is out of reach for the ordinary person in this part of the world, leaving many to rely on spiritual justice. May the souls of the departed rest in peace. Don't forget to like and share this video. Who knows, maybe one day justice will be served. Until then, please subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next video. Stay safe, guys.